Alrighty, good day, folks. My name is Josh Leveque, and a lifelong gardener with a little pause there in high school. My family were farm managers in Texas of a pecan farm when I was a youngster, and I really feel like that experience, the kids didn't really, they didn't force us to do any of the farm chores or anything like that, but just that experience growing up on a farm in rural Texas was really, you know, turned out to be really uh, important to where I am right now. Um, my family moved to Falmouth in 1987 when I was in fourth grade. I did fourth grade here, and I kind of like forgot about farming and gardening. And then in college, um, had a professor that kind of at art school that reawoke that in me. And I actually left art school in my junior year and started working on farms in Maine and Vermont, and then moved back here with my wife and have been kind of working with plants and animals, raising our own food since then in 2001. We had two really great experiences. So as soon as I left art school, I worked with a gentleman named Will Bonzal in Maine, whose life's work has been preserving seeds. He was an early member of the Seed Savers Exchange, and on his farm, he was in charge of the collections in the United States of biennials, which are are all plants that need 2 years to complete their life cycle. So we'll get a little bit into that. Most of the things that we think of in our gardens as annuals are biennials. So things that are annuals are things that you put a seed in the ground in the spring and you harvest a seed in the fall. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squash are kind of the big ones. I'm sure there's other ones. But then the biennials are a little more confusing for us gardeners because beets, kale, carrots, parsley are just a few of the biennials. So what confuses the matter is we put the seed in the ground in the spring, we harvest the part that we eat in the summer or the fall, but that plant doesn't make its seeds until it has a vernalization. It gets a period of cold and then a warming up to make its seeds. So a lot of those things that we might think of as annuals are actually biennials because they don't make their seeds until year 2. What else? So why save seeds? There's a lot of amazing seed companies, and I'm going to be honest with you. We do not save. We grow a lot of different vegetables and flowers, and we don't save seeds on most of them because we have a lot of balls in the air. We raise dairy goats. We have rabbits that we raise for meat. We have 3 teenagers. Well, 2 teenagers and a young a young adult. We have our own business, but seed saving is, so we buy seeds from lots of great small seed companies that are focused on varieties for home gardeners, varieties that may be more adapted to home gardening or small scale farming. Siskiyou is on the West Coast. Turtle Tree Seeds is in New York State. They grow a bunch, if not all of their seeds, or work with a network of seed growers in their area. This is a new one, Adaptive Seeds, that we are buying from Uprising Seeds on the West Coast. And then we get most of our seeds from Johnny's Selected Seeds in Albion, Maine. High Mowing Seeds was our next seed experience. We worked on High Mowing Seeds in 2001 in the fall and really learned how to process seeds there, which we'll get into today, turning these piles of dead-looking plants into the seeds that come in your seed package. So why save seeds? It really allows us to you know, so when we're gardeners, we're stewarding our land. We're making sure that we're increasing the productivity of our garden spots, either through cover cropping or compost or adding manure. And then every year we bring in new seeds, and we find the seeds that we like, and things that are productive in our gardens. But when we start saving seeds, we look at those plants in our gardens in a different way. You know, there's all of the genetic traits that are obvious to us: the size of the plants, the color of the fruit, the size of the fruit. But hidden in there are all those other genetic traits that allow certain plants to be more adapted to cold, drought, poorer soils. You know, so we start to look at, and we see in maybe an individual plant in a population that's either making bigger fruit or is tolerating the conditions that either Mother Nature or we throw at it. And we can start to think about this in a different way. Like maybe this plant is more adapted to our environment or the way that we're growing, and we can start selecting those and saving those. And we have one variety that we have selected at our place, and it's more of a what's called a land race. It's not a consistent, it's a tomatillo, which is really important for us. We love tomatillos, and we aim to go into the winter with 3 gallons of roasted tomatillo puree that we work through all through the winter. So we had some varieties like Toma Verde and Rio Grande that were like the common open pollinated varieties, but that we've been saving, and we just mix them up. We're not trying to keep them separate. We're just choosing the plants and the fruits that are productive in the, you know, 8 to 10 plants that we grow. And then I was at Windfall, and there were these giant, like baseball-sized tomatillos. So saved seeds from those and then incorporated those into our mix. And so every year we're selecting, you know, we're not so concerned with maintaining Toma Verde, you know, and, you know, matching it to how it's supposed to be, the size of the fruit and the size of the plant. We're more interested in productivity and you know, how adapted it is to us and the place where we are. Did you have a question?
Yes, the giant tomatillos that you found, are the seeds any larger than the
Nope.
usual tiny ones?
Nope. And we just mix them. So you know, when you're saving seeds, you end up with like so much more than you really need. So I just used a metal straw and took some cores out of those tomatillos, processed the seeds the same way that we're going to process tomato seeds, and then just threw them in with my other seeds. And so that is kind of how our approach has evolved. You know, initially it was like, we need to like preserve this one, you know, Amish paste tomato. Not so much anymore. You know, we're more interested in what's working in our gardens. Any other questions before we move on? So we all learn about flowers and pollination in high school, and maybe some of us have gone farther, but it's actually more you know, more interesting than a bee visiting a flower, getting pollen on it, and moving on to the next flower. Plants have developed all these amazing little tricks to really promote genetic diversity in their populations. So this is like, these are squash flowers, and I'm sure most of you probably know that there's female and male squash flowers on the plants. On the same plant, some plants have female flowers on one plant, male flowers on the other plants. But so the flower that we see in our high school diagrams, that flower is called a perfect flower. It has the male parts, the anthers, and the female parts, the pistils, all there. And, you know, and there are plants like that in our garden, like tomatoes and peppers. They have all of the parts there. We can't really see them unless we open it up. But on the outside, we have the anthers that create the pollen. And then on the inside, if we open that up, it's going to be hard to do, but there's the pistil that receives the pollen from the other. In this case, a tomato can be self-pollinated. So outside is where the pollen's created. On the inside. At the very tip there, you can't really see it, but that's where the pistil is that receives the pollen and makes the seeds. On the outside, we have the anthers that create the pollen, and then just at this very tip, you can't really see it, but it's hiding. But when a bee visits another flower and comes to collect this pollen, it fertilizes the pistil, and then the seeds are formed. In tomato and pepper's case, the flower can and often, typically, is self-pollinated. So we have a honeybee right here. A bumblebee visiting the male flower. So we'll see if it comes and visits this female flower. Oh, it has? Oh, so it went the other way. But anyways, so here we just have the female parts here that receive the pollen after the honeybee comes out and pollinates it. All right, so it transferred the pollen from the male to the female, and if this was still connected to the plant, it would make a zucchini. We're not going to talk about zucchinis so much because I'm going to focus on the plants in our gardens that are super easy to collect and process. So tomatoes, the seeds are ready when the fruit is ready. Peppers, the same thing. What else do I have? I have cilantro and dill, and I have some beans and peas and some other herbs, and there was something else. Oh, kale. So, zucchini, ready to be consumed in the garden. This is Costata romanesca. It's an amazing zucchini that actually has great flavor and is relatively good as it gets bigger. Not this big, but even at this size, this zucchini still does not have mature seeds in it. It'll start to turn orange and get harder. The skin will get harder, and then it starts to be ready. So we're not going to talk about zucchini. We will start with tomatoes. So these are a couple of tomatoes from our garden. They are ripe and ready to eat. This is one that caught my interest because they call it a winter tomato. You can harvest it green and bring it into your house, and supposedly it's going to stay red, and it'll ripen up over the winter. Unfortunately, and they said this in the description, it has like zero flavor. This is like a supermarket tomato at its finest, which is not that great. But we will talk about that. This is called gold medal. It is a much better tomato. It's open pollinated. So open pollinated means the seeds that come from this tomato will make a new tomato that is very similar to this. It won't be a clone to this, but it'll be very similar. When we see hybrid on a seed packet, that means that two distinct strains of a plant have been combined to create a predictable offspring. And so all of the seeds produced in that first generation, all the plants will look and act very similar. But the next generation, if you save seeds from that, will be a total combination of the genetics from the two parents. And there could be some cool stuff in there, and there could be some flops. And we've been taught that we want to have our varieties be exactly like their parents. I'm feeling less and less sure about that, but some of me still is thinking about that. So and those F1 hybrids are created by big commercial seed companies. So they're thinking about traits, certain traits. There are traits that can be beneficial to us as home gardeners, disease resistant, productivity. But the thing that's less interesting is that we can't save the seeds, or if we save the seeds, we're not looking at an old variety where people have been selecting it and it has diversity in it. We're looking at two very commercial varieties that may not have traits that are interesting to us once they get dehybridized for that next generation. So tomatoes, this is ripe and ready to roll. It's super easy. So the goal, this book right here will give you all the rules on growing seeds if you're selling them, maintaining genetic diversity. It'll say something like you need to collect seeds from a minimum of 50 different plants if you're growing them for market. If, the beauty is us home gardeners, our livelihoods do not depend on this. And so we can, do it the best we can. So Carol Deppy, she says, save from as many plants as possible. If our tomato crop doesn't work out or, slowly, our variety slowly deteriorates, it's not the end of the world. So ideally, we're saving from as many as possible. This is just one tomato, but we're just cutting it open and we're scooping the seeds out and leaving the flesh behind. We don't have to be super meticulous about it. So this is called wet processing. Other seeds that get wet processed are all these fruits, watermelons, cucumbers, cantaloupe, winter squash, and zucchini can be technically wet processed, but it's often easier to just cut open a winter squash like a butternut and scoop the seeds out and dry them. So we have all 50 of our tomato plants in here, or as many as we have in our garden. We get rid of that in a bucket or just on the ground somewhere. And we add some water. We stir it up. And we let it sit. So what we're doing here, there's that gel around each seed. That protects the seed when it's inside the fruit from germinating. And we're trying to break that down with the natural critters that are in the bacteria that's naturally in everywhere. So this is starting to smell pretty funky. And so I did this. This has probably been here 3 days. I just scooped it out. I added the water just like this, and I let it sit on the counter. And the fertile seeds are going to sink to the bottom, and the goop and the infertile seeds are going to rise to the top. And we just keep pouring it off. And there's going to be some seeds that come out. And then I'm going to add a little more water. So tomatoes are perfect flowers, and they're often self-pollinated, but there is a lot of pollinator activity on tomatoes, and you can get crosses. So if you're growing multiple tomatoes next to each other, there is the possibility that you're going to get some combination of those, which could be cool and which I think it's usually going to be pretty edible. And some interesting stuff could happen. Peppers are the same thing, but my pepper seeds are always getting mixed. I saved a variety called Aleppo last year, and I planted 6 plants, and every single plant has a different form and a different pepper shape. So some of these I'm pouring out still have the gel, so you're going to let this go for a little bit longer than 3 days. But in the end, you have some seeds down there. Yeah, this definitely needs to go for a couple. You can pass it around. You can see the gel is still around those seeds.
Did you let that sit inside or outside?
Inside, yeah.
Inside,
It should be. It should. No, you don't want to cook it, but it does want to be warm. You don't want to put it in the refrigerator. So how do you maintain in your home garden if you want to keep gold medal as true as possible and grow 15 different tomatoes in your garden? Then you can, there's a couple of tricks. The simplest is, if I can find it. Oh, it's in my pocket.
Do you use chlorinated water or do you use?
That's just the water that came out of the,
So tap water's okay?
it is. I'm sure if you used, bottled water, it's probably might be better, but tap water's just fine. If you wanted to preserve your gold medal tomato, you would go down to your garden and you would find the flowers on the bunch that are not open yet, and you would get rid of everything that has opened. You would get rid of any, on one cluster, get rid of any fruit that also has been started to form. That one hasn't opened yet. I'm getting rid of any of this fruit. And then you can use a bag. We use these to protect our grapes from birds. We don't do a lot of this. But since this is a perfect flower and it is not an outcrossing, it's an inbreeding, so it can be self-pollinated, you can safely do this with both tomatoes and peppers. You just leave that on there until all the flowers have opened and the fruits started to form. You could leave it on even longer, or you just want to mark this some way to indicate that these are most likely pure seeds. You can do that with certain things, especially in this family group, the Solanum group, which includes eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, tomatillos.
So you don't need a pollinator insect to help the process.
For this family, the Solanum family, kale is very different. I have some kale here. So kale, do you have any kale flowers in the garden or no? Doesn't matter. So this is kale, red Russian kale. They have perfect flowers, so they have all of the parts, but they're not the flower from the pollen from one flower on the same plant cannot pollinate a flower from the other plant. Any ideas on why a plant would create that little trick? So the more genetic diversity that's in a plant population, the more resilient that plant population is. Like I talked about, there's all these physical traits that we can see and put a name to, but there's everything else that's hidden in there that allows it to cope with disease, drought, any other types of stressors that we can't see. So the more opportunities for a plant to combine genetics with another plant, the more resilient that plant population is. So this is kale's little trick for ensuring diversity, And when we plant a packet of kale seeds, every single plant looks pretty much the same, but there are genes hiding in there that that we can't see, that have traits that we can't necessarily see. I guess we can talk about kale now.
I've never seen kale seed pod, so that's a biennial?
It's a biennial, yep. So this is another one that if you've grown kale in your garden, has anybody had kale go to flower in their garden? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're 4 to 5 feet tall, covered with yellow flowers, covered with insects, and that's how the pollen, in that high school diagram, this is what's happening. they require the honeybees and bumblebees and other critters to transfer pollen from one plant to the other. As the plant grows, it starts off, the seed stalks are short and kind of a fist with all the little flowers. And as the stalk rises, the older flowers are down low and the new flowers are constantly being opened up and producing up high. So what happens is the seeds on the bottom are more mature than the seeds on the top. So when we choose, so the longer that the seeds are on the plant and the plant is in the ground, the more viable those seeds are. But there are certain factors that we are up against on getting these seeds from the garden to our seed packets. Birds really love kale seeds and can really eat a lot of seeds in a short amount of time. So we're trying to pick the time to harvest. It's not the ideal, because ideally this just happens in the garden and we just pick them. But we're up against the birds, and also the natural dispersal method of kale is these little seed pockets, these seed pods are like spring loaded, and they're trying to fling their seeds as far away from the mother plant as possible to spread the population. So we're up against that. We can't let this go into the garden like this. We have to pick what we think is the best time based on all of the factors, pull it and dry it inside. So there's going to be a combination of fertile and infertile seeds in here. There's lots of ways to do this, but I think the tidiest way to do it is in a feed bag or some type of bag to minimize the seeds going all over the place. You can do it on a tarp, a big tarp, but I think it's just as easy to do it in a bag here. So we need to separate the seeds from the other plant parts, and then we need to separate the seeds from all of the crushed up plant bits. So if anybody wants to just kind of rub these plants together, no, okay, so I'll do it. You're just kind of trying to break that all up. And then there are a couple of ways that we are going to separate all of the plant material from the seeds. So we can use screens. This is a set of graduated screens from small to large.
Ooh, look at that.
And so we use these screens, based on the seed, we use them for different things. Sometimes we will use a big screen on top of a small screen and try to and the seeds will go through the holes and collect here, and all the plant material will stay above it. Sometimes we will, on a bigger seed, a seed that's bigger than this, we'll collect the seeds on top of here and let the plant material go through. With the kale seeds, I think we will start, so the kale seeds are bigger than those, so those will collect the kale seeds. And then we want to decide which one of these. So we'll start big, and we'll pour the material from there into here. We'll get some of this big stuff out of here. And so what's going to happen is the seeds are going to go through this mesh, and I'm going to break it up a little bit more. And so the mature seeds are going to be the ones that open up and spread their seeds much more readily than the immature seeds. But then below there, you can pass that around and see what we have next. So there's some seed saving. So I think we got these originally from a seed growing collective called Abundant Harvest, but I'm sure like Fedco seeds or, you know, I'm not sure, but they are available. Yes. So these seeds we purchased probably over 20 years ago, and they came as just a set of the screens, and then we made the boxes for them. You can buy them both ways, and I know I've seen them in different seed companies, but I can't recall off the top of my head. So if we want to separate, if we want to separate the seed parts, so we can use another screen, or we can also just float things out. So that's going to get some of the stuff out. And we're looking to separate not only this stuff, but any infertile seeds. I think I'm going to use, you're probably going to have a little bit of kale growing here, but so I still have some stuff in there. I got like most of the light stuff out. So I think I'm going to use this one again. What's that?
You said you were trying to separate the infertile seeds.
Yeah, right. So those,
The lighter ones?
yeah, right. And we can also separate the infertile ones out with the screens as well. So I'm going to send them back through this same setup, but I'm not going to push things through as much. And I got all of that out. So we're getting closer. I'm going to try it again. So just by doing this again and again a few times, I can get more of this stuff out of here. So certain things to think about with our seeds that we're saving at home is that some diseases can be seed-borne and transmitted through our seeds, but we have some pretty simple techniques for minimizing that happening in the future, and it's mostly through hot water. Each seed and disease has a different kind of threshold for temperature and length of time at that temperature. So you just put the seeds in water, you know, warm water. There's a whole process in one of these books, this one right here. So this is kind of like the go-to book that kind of breaks it down for kind of like the amateur to semi-professional seed grower. It's called Seed to Seed by Susan Ashworth. And if you really want to geek out about it and get serious about it, this is what this is kind of like the commercial reference, Organic Seed Grower by John Navazio. This one is probably much more than most of us really need, and honestly, I have not done that much with it. This is a great one by Carol Depp. It's called Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties. It's taking it to the next level, and you know what I was talking about. You know, selecting different techniques, making fun combinations, and seeing what happens. So we also can use wind as to separate out. In this case, a fan. And so there's a couple of factors here with using the fan. How fast the fan speed is and how close we are to the fan. With a smaller seed like these kale seeds, we want to start kind of slow and kind of far away because we don't want to blow all of our seeds onto the mulch or into the wood chips. So I'm going to start back here, and I have a big bowl somewhere. I thought I did. So let's start back here and see if we're getting anything. All right, I can go a little bit closer. It's better to start farther away because it's going to be really hard to pick the kale seeds out of the wood chips. I can go a little bit closer. All right, so we've gotten pretty close. This would be fine, but part of me wants to get it even better. And also maybe get out some of the immature seeds that are in there. So I'm gonna use a smaller screen and try to keep the larger seeds on top and let the smaller seeds go down below. All right, so a lot went through. I still have some crud on the top. But if you look close, so this is what went through. The larger seeds are on the left and the smaller seeds are on the right. So these are most likely to give us pretty high germination rate. Some of these are going to germinate, but there's going to be much higher germination on these larger seeds.
Is that because the larger seeds are more mature?
Yeah.
So they had a chance to like fully grow it.
Yeah, they're the ones that were closer to the bottom of the stalk.
Is that true on all plants?
No, kale specifically, the flowers. Well, some flowers, the stalks. As the stalks grow up, the flowers are older on the bottom and younger at the top, and then it's different on other plants. I can't come up with. So the smaller seeds are on the right, and the larger seeds are on the left.
And you want to grow the larger ones?
The larger ones right here, yeah. And again, this is much more kale seed than most of us are going to need, but we really love to also just grow baby kale, and we just plant it like salad greens, plant it real dense and just harvest it small. We don't have to really worry about cabbage loopers or
kale in the spring because it all falls off the plant.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So now we have separated these out. And we want to determine, okay, we think these big ones are going to be the most, are going to germinate the highest rate, but we want to know for sure. So the way we do that is a germination test. You just take 100 seeds, you put them on a damp paper towel, and you see how many germinate. So these are the seeds that we processed last fall, red Russian kale, and we can see that most of them have germinated.
Wow. When did you put them in the paper towel?
This I put in the paper towel on September 10th, and today's the 14th, 13th. All seeds germinate, have their own timelines. You know, an older seed's going to take longer to germinate than new seed, and different species are going to germinate slower, like carrots. You know, your carrot germination test is not going to look like this in 4 days.
So can you then plant those?
You could, or you just put them in the compost. Yeah, you absolutely could plant these.
So that's a pretty good germination rate.
That's a really good germination rate. I don't even see a single one that hasn't germinated.
And Josh, the reason to separate the organic matter from the seeds is because the organic matter is going to keep breaking down.
ground and you don't want that next to the seeds, or
Just because it's fun and it's a cool challenge, you know. Yes, you do not need to be super neurotic about this if you're not super neurotic about this. But if you are super neurotic about it, it's kind of a fun challenge. Yep.
Oh, exciting. Why are you germinating them?
Just to see how how productive the seed is. You know, if we have that big bucket of seeds right there, and we go to plant it next spring, you know, for some reason it could not be viable seed, and this is to know how, you know, how viable the seed is. All right. Peppers are also super easy. Like I said before, they are super likely to cross and create all kinds of, you know, variety. And we can do the same thing as we did tomatoes to maintain it. These are serranos. So we typically eat them when they're green, but these are not ripe fruit. Just like the squash, cucumbers, green beans, we're eating the immature fruit. So the seeds inside of them are not going to be viable. These are mature serranos. All peppers mature to a color. There's no pepper that I am aware of that's going to be green when it's mature and the seeds inside are viable. So immature, mature. If we were to save the seeds from the green serranos and do a germination test, it's going to be close to zero. And I think visibly you can see the difference when we cut these open. The seeds are going to look different.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they're bigger.
They're yellow.
Right.
This is the same thing that happens inside of a cucumber. You know, the seeds are underdeveloped. With the pepper seeds, you just scrape those pepper seeds out and you separate the vein and you just dry them out. So I haven't really talked about drying out, but it's super important and kind of nuanced. We use a dehydrator to take the chance and the risk out. We just put it in, set it at 100 degrees, 105 degrees, and let them dry out. You don't want to do it too hot. You don't want to cook these seeds, and you don't want to do it for too long, but you do want them to be dry. And, you know, a pepper seed at 105 degrees in a dehydrator for a day or two is going to be dry. We can do this. I'm going to sacrifice this delicious costata romanesca zucchini so that we can do the same thing with it. We don't want our zucchini that we eat to be full of seeds. It's not going to taste that good. But if we're saving seeds from it, we need them to be. Also, the beauty of the costata romanesca, the flavor is great. It's not going to give you 500 zucchinis. You know, it's not productive. You know, some things you want to be productive, and some things in a home garden you just don't. And zucchini is one of them, I think. You're getting plenty of zucchini. So I've kind of crossed through the seeds, and you can see the seed coat is starting to develop in these seeds, whereas here it's like the seeds are just barely, you can pass that around. It's not as descriptive as I hoped it was going to be. But what the other thing? So I do have some, green beans. Again, when they are at the stage that we want to eat them, they have very little seeds in them. So what we do is we wait for as many of them to be dry, yellow and dry on the plant as possible. This is a dry bean. And then we pull that up and dry it inside and dry the plant down until all of the leaves are dry. And so unlike kale, which once you harvest it, the seeds aren't going to, get mature. Green beans, if you harvest them like this and hang them up, they're still going to get some nutrients, or, they're going to still mature on this plant as a whole plant. It's better than harvesting the beans when the plant's still green. It's going to be better in the long term. And we do it the same way as we did with the kale. We put it in the bag. So with green beans, we always, at a certain point, they get away from us and we have, pods on the plant that are not really at the ideal eating phase anymore. So that's how we, and then we save seeds from those. We grow a bush variety called Maasai, which is a thin green bean, but it's super productive over a long period of time. And I'm just kind of putting stuff in here, or we can put them on a screen. So this one has been harvested and drying for 2 weeks. This one I just pulled the other day. So this isn't super ready. I'm gonna give this 2 more weeks to fully dry out. And, but I mean, it's super easy. So with beans and peas and larger seeded seeds, we can get some soil-borne diseases that can be transferred from the seed to the next generation, but we also run into some other issues. There are some weevils, which is a small insect, that can get into the seeds and feed on the cotyledons while they're in storage.
Is powdery mildew like one of the diseases that can spread from seed to the next plant?
I honestly don't know, but I don't think so. So yeah, with most of our squash family plants in our gardens right now, they're probably loaded with powdery mildew. I don't think that we're going to transfer powdery mildew through the squash seeds on the inside of the plants, but you'll have to check on that. So there, we got that pretty quick, and then we can just float out most of that stuff, pick it out. But we don't know if there are weevil eggs on these beans. So once we are sure that they're completely dry, we're going to put them in a double Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer to kill anything that might be in there. So I see something in here that indicates that there could be the presence of a seed-eating critter. There's a bean here that's essentially been hollowed out, and it has a hole. So you can pass that around. So yeah, these are definitely going to need to get put in the freezer. What's that? I would just store them in the freezer if it was me. No, as long as the beans are completely dry. If you put any seeds in the freezer that still have any moisture in them, that moisture is going to freeze and damage some, if not all, of the seeds that are in there.
Generally speaking, you can freeze seeds.
That's how we aim to store our seeds at home, in a double, like a Ziploc bag inside of a Ziploc bag in the freezer.
Why are you doubling the Ziploc bag?
Just to minimize any moisture from the freezer. Do we always do that? No. I've driven around with a basket of seeds in my vehicle for probably the last 3 weeks, which is awful for seeds, in the heat and the sun. Typically you want to store your seeds in dry and dark.
I've had winter rye seeds in a hot trunk for something like 3 years now. Are they just dead?
Do a soil test, do a germination test, I mean. And different seeds are sensitive to it in different ways. So some seed might, deteriorate in, much quicker in those conditions than others. Leek, all of the seeds in the allium family, the onion family, leeks, shallots, chives, any of those that we start from seeds are super temperamental and typically 1 or 2 years viability at the best. So I've learned through multiple years of thinking, oh, this seed's only 3 years old, I'll plant it out, and having really poor germination, waiting for 3 or 4 weeks, and then ordering new seeds, waiting 2 weeks. And, with a lot of those things, you want to start them as early as possible in February. And so by the time I get to my new seeds, it's 6 or 7 weeks past when I ideally would have started it. So, yeah. All right. Well, are there any questions? We didn't do the cilantro, but it's essentially the same thing. Cilantro doesn't really seem to get messed with by the birds, so we just have to figure out the right time. So in the garden right now, cilantro that's underripe looks like this. There's still lots of flowers, there's small seeds, and then we're getting a little closer here. The seeds are starting to brown up. There's still green seeds, so the brown seeds are going to be more likely to be viable. But these are seeds that were in the garden that didn't get messed with. These are seeds that I pulled and dried inside for the last couple of weeks. We just get them off of the stems into the bag and then separate them with the screens and the fan. So you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question because you guys like did zucchini. I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I would just try to do zucchini and I have seeds, but I'm like they're really pale. Are they gonna germinate or do they look like actual like a light tannish?
So what you can do is get a double paper towel, get it moist, put in, I don't know if you have a lot of seeds.
Yeah, I got a lot.
Yeah.
Some are darker than others.
So put 50 seeds to 100 seeds on that damp paper towel, roll it up, put it in a Ziploc bag, give it with zucchini seeds, I don't know, like a week, open it up and see how many germinate. And that will give you your germination rate. Most of our garden seeds that we buy from the seed companies all of them have minimum germination requirements. And it's typically, for most things, it's above 85%. So if you're under 85%, there's certain things you can do, that the more mature seeds are going to be heavier. So you can use a fan to try to blow out some of the lighter seeds if you get a low germination. There's certain things that you can do even if you get low germination, there are certain things you can do after the fact to boost your germination. And it's mostly like figuring out what tricks, like I did with the kale seeds, either size, if you can grade them by size so that your bigger seeds are more likely to be mature, and also your heavier seeds are more likely. So how can you separate the heavier seeds from the lighter seeds or the larger seeds from the smaller seeds?
I saw something online like trying to ferment them like you do like tomato seeds and stuff. Would that work or like?
No. That process is just used to separate the flesh from the seed. That's the only thing that you're doing there. So, good luck.
Josh, can you speed up the tomato processing by just shaking the jar?
That definitely helps.
Yeah, because I've found that it goes much faster if I keep shaking it.
Yeah, but then you can also just let it chill on the counter for a week and
Yeah,
just.
I can smash them on a paper towel with a butter knife. I mean, that'll
that will
evaporate
help.
your gel and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Up to
Right.
a point, yeah.
Yeah.
And then after you've done that last process with the water and the tomato seeds, are you just draining out the last ones that are sinking and drying them?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And you could, you know, literally just put them on a paper towel. Paper towel's a little dicey because they do stick to the paper towel, but you know, just drying them out.
And you would do the same thing with the freezer? You would completely dry them and then store them in the freezer?
That's the most effective way, if the seeds are dry, to store them and protect their longevity. Like I said, there's a real range on how long seeds are going to be viable. Tomatoes, tomatoes, and like anything in the brassica family, like kales, tend to last longer. And then on the other end of the spectrum are things in the carrot family: carrots, parsnips, dill, parsley. Those seeds are super perishable, and really you're going to get a year or two out of them before the germination rate really drops out.